Alex here from Sales for Nerds, kicking off the Sales for Nerds podcast. If you feel more comfortable with SQL than sales calls, more at home writing test suites than proposals, more interested in crunching numbers than shaking hands, if you think networking should be about routers rather than cocktails with strangers, if you're more interested in debating code editors than negotiating deals, but somehow you ended up responsible for some of those sales and marketing activities, this is the podcast for you. Today, we have an incredible treat. June Rodil, Master Sommelier, is here to join us to talk about what it means to be a Master Sommelier, how to enjoy wine, and what she learned when she went from being a sommelier to actually opening her own restaurant. June came over from the Philippines, where she was born and worked as a waitress in college, and she went from planning to go to law school to deciding that she wanted a career in wine. She joined and she's worked for a number of the best restaurants in Austin. She currently works for McGuire Mormon Hospitality. And for folks who know the Austin restaurant scene, they run Jeffrey's, Josephine House, La Perla's, Clark's, Lambert's, Elizabeth Street. Anything I'm forgetting? And June's.
And June's, yeah.
So, all good stuff. I'm always a little skeptical when I hear about conglomerates, and I feel like people are going to lose quality, but these are just some of my favorite places to eat around town. And we tried to go to June's once shortly after it opened, and something happened, so we couldn't make it, and I haven't been able to make it back, but I'm looking forward to checking out June's.
Well, yeah, it was like the second day we opened, and we had to close to do a little more construction. We kind of jumped the boat on opening. We're like, oh, we need a day to relax for a second and get some more construction done.
And this is a very special episode because normally I bring a bottle of wine to people and I interview them. And because I'm interviewing an MS, June was kind enough to bring me a bottle of wine. This is just a wonderful podcast as far as I'm concerned. I need to figure out how to repeat this experience. June, tell us what we're drinking here.
So I recently did a speaking engagement with the Austrian Wine Marketing Board. So this is a Saint Laurent, which is an indigenous grape from Austria. But I mean, essentially what it is, it's a light-bodied, fresh red wine from Austria. And it's kind of perfect for the Austin weather right now because we're hoping for the fall to actually happen. So it might be a little bit, too warm for cabs and Bordeaux right now. But it's kind of that introduction into new lighting, fall weather.
Interesting. It's sweet.
It's got good fruit to it. Yeah, absolutely. It's not. It's definitely not rustic. It's not earthy, which you kind of expect from a European wine. They're generally earthier in style. It has a little bit of a funky forest floor quality to it, but it's primarily fruit driven.
Forest floor quality. I'm going to have to ask some of my friends about that.
Yeah.
Because I've got some people who like the earthiness. I tend to like the earth. Other people really hate it. And that forest floor, sometimes if it's like earth, it can be okay. But if it's wet leaves, they don't like it. Yeah. So this, I feel like, would be right down the middle. But I don't think there's going to be any left for him to try.
No, you got to get another bottle. And that's why you always buy more than one bottle.
So something that I glossed over a little bit in the introduction, you are one of, 150?
Masters
in North America?
Yeah, there's I think just under 150. I believe we just had 3 pass this year, so we might be right at 150.
And this is something that there have been about, I think, 230 ever?
Yes, in the world.
So it is one of the most demanding qualification, certification exams you can possibly take. And if you've seen some of those movies like Somm, you probably know what I'm talking about, and you can't wait to hear what June's going to say. For folks who have no idea what a Master Sommelier is, what is a Master Sommelier?
So it's an accreditation. There are 4 levels of testing. So you have an intro exam, a certified exam, an advanced exam, and then the Master Sommelier exam is by invite only. So you have to pass all 3 first. And then there are 3 components to the last exam. You have 3 years to pass it, or you start over.
All the way over.
Not to the intro, but all the way to the beginning of the master exam.
Okay.
And there are some people who just can never get past it, which is heartbreaking. But there's a lot of different personality traits and a lot of different intelligent traits that you have to kind of acquire as you pass the exam. So there's a blind tasting component, which I think is the most prominent, that people are like, ooh, that's crazy. You have 6 wines that are presented to you, and then you have 25 minutes to examine them, and there's a grid of points that you have to hit. So you have to examine the site, the aromas, the palate, the structure, and through that deductively state what the wine is.
And so when you say what the wine is, how specific are we talking about?
So we're talking about the grape, or
because I can do red or white.
Right. Yeah. Did we tell you? Well,
the lights are on.
Yeah, the lights are on, and you are not blindfolded for this exam. But you have to get the grape or blend of grapes, the region, the country, the region, the quality level, and the vintage. So
you would, if you were tasting this blind, you would basically be reading this label off. Is that the idea, without having the label?
Without saying the producer.
Okay.
Without saying the winemaker, essentially. So I would say that, and honestly, I would say with confidence, this is not a wine that you would get, because it's a more rare grape that you don't see market wide. So we pull classics.
Okay.
So wines that are of a specific region, and they're kind of iconic because of their style and where they come from. This is still fairly new to the market, right? So you would say that this is a Saint Laurent grape from Austria, from the Burgenland region, 2012 vintage.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you would expect to be able to tell that from looking at it, smelling it, and tasting it.
Yes.
Okay. And for the folks listening here, you're saying that they only pull the sort of classic grapes. I know that when I was watching some of these movies, they didn't sound like,
right.
Chardonnay, Cab, Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
Like, they go beyond the real basics.
That's correct. I mean, classic throughout the world. So it is definitely like, you have to know your geography for wine. I've never realized how much geography I needed to hone in on, and like understand like climate and all of that stuff to really understand winemaking. But when you think about it, it's agriculture first. So,
right.
So classics throughout the world, I guess.
Now, one of the things that struck me watching these folks studying, at least as presented in these shows, is how obsessed they are and how hard they have to work. And some of my friends who are doctors said this is like going to medical school, right? You're just studying all the time, and you're kind of with your buddies, which I can't even see how you do it if you didn't have buddies. But what's it like when you're trying to... Do you ever have those moments where you say, why am I doing this?
Oh, yes. Oh, my God, yes. For sure. And it is. I mean, the only way that I can really attest to it is for people who are trying to pass their medical exam or the bar, because it is outside of your normal day-to-day life.
Right.
You still have to somehow sustain your work life, your personal life, and then set time aside to study. It's insane. And you do have to have a buddy for sure, because otherwise you'll go mad. Yeah. And it ends up being one of your best friends, because when you think about it, it's kind of like the more strife you go through, the harder you work at something, you really bond with somebody who's going through the same thing.
And it seemed, one of the things that was funny to me is I really love wine, but I don't know too much about it. I just really enjoy it. And these people who know so much about it, they didn't look like they were enjoying it a lot of the time. Does that love come back once you pass?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's such a competitive test. It really is. And I think there's a level of comfort that you have to have in yourself to pass the exam, quite frankly, because you have to realize that, this isn't the end all be all. And I really, whenever I was going through the exam, there were moments of doubt where you're like, am I even smart enough to do this? Am I ever going to get this? And then I think really when I finally took a deep breath and was like, this is not my life. Like, if I never become a master sommelier, that doesn't negate all of the past experiences and, and accomplishments that I've done in my career, and really shedding that layer helped me really focus on the exam.
Okay.
Because you can see it in the documentaries too, like people who are just consumed by needing to pass this test. And I feel for them, because whenever you get to that level of examination, every person in that room is every other person's hero.
Right.
You know, you see people that you've read about in our trade magazines, or you love their work, you go to their restaurants, you think their lists are brilliant, their service is impeccable. They've already reached the top. But for some reason, these post-nominals, like, are not behind their names, so they feel like they haven't been there yet.
Right.
And I'm looking at these people and I'm like, you're already here. You're already in the big game. You know, you already made it. But there's this exam that's like in the way to get the business card that says MS.
Well, and you guys all do spend a lot of time and energy trying to get that MS there. And it must mean something beyond just the letters.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, it means all of the time and effort. And I mean, you know, we're sitting here drinking this bottle of wine and it's very enjoyable, but just think exactly what you said. Like, if I was drinking this bottle of wine and only picking it apart, right? It's sad because it's like you get to this point where you're analyzing it too much and you're forgetting that pleasure component of the thing that you fell in love with.
Right. And that's one thing that I noticed when I met you at, I think it was at the wine auction downtown. And here I am talking like I'm someone who belongs at a wine auction. We just know people who invite us to wine auctions. But, you know, I think of sommeliers and I think of these people that I see taking this exam. It's almost like they're really knowledgeable and smart, but a lot of them, they feel like the professor that used to love a subject and now just knows a lot about it but doesn't love it anymore. And you love it. And when you meet people, you're like, oh, I want to have a glass of wine with June. That would totally be fun. And I'm so glad that you're here and we're having a glass of wine and we're discussing this stuff and you have this tremendous depth of knowledge, but all the joy is still there.
Yes. Well, I think that, I don't know. I mean, I didn't want to lose that joy because I truly, truly love what I do. I'm lucky.
Right.
You know, and I think sometimes that when you're so focused on trying to get to a level of expertise or an accomplishment, sometimes you lose that. And I never wanted to. And first and foremost, you know, it really isn't even wine. Like, first and foremost, what I love is the hospitality industry. Mm-hmm. I like to be able to entertain people, make sure that they're having fun. I'm not even like an entertainer. Like, I don't sing or dance. I'm not a performer. I just enjoy the affectation of people sitting at a round table and having a really great time.
That works for me.
Yeah, it's like a really good goal to have. You know, and it kind of stems from my childhood. My favorite memories were going out to restaurants with my family. Okay. Because nobody had to worry about the dishes or like what was going to be made. Nobody had to like rush home from work to make sure that there was enough time to get food on the table and get everything done. Right. So there are these amazing like dinners that we would have as a family, from anywhere from something like P.F. Chang's to like Wolfgang Puck. Right. But all of them were so enjoyable because we were just enjoying each other's company in the process. And I love that. I love that about my job.
Now, I think this is something that a lot of people run into. They're really good at something or they have a lot of passion for something and then they build a business around it and that's what ends up killing some of the passion. How did you kind of keep this North Star of I want to make sure I enjoy this as you study for this exam, as you open a restaurant? You did a lot of stuff. You were involved in other restaurant ventures beforehand. It's not like you just sit around drinking wine all day. I mean, don't get me wrong. There were moments where I was not enjoying it for sure because the restaurant industry is it's tough. You know, nobody works a 40-hour week. That is, and I think that there are many industries that are the same, where a 40-hour a week is like half a week, you know? An 8-hour day is a half day. I mean, my fiance jokes because I'm like, I'm just going to go in for a half day. And he's like, okay, see you in 8 hours. No big deal. But you kind of have to find the time. So time management is really important. And I think that I didn't lose my focus because all of the things that I hate to do, like spreadsheets or I really hate scheduling, like creating a schedule for other people is really difficult for me because I'm like, why can't you guys schedule yourself? I manage my time. Why can't you manage yours? So things like that, I just really wanted to do as efficiently and as fast as possible. So I knocked those out right away so I could afford more time to focus on the things that I really loved. And I quit my job. I was the director of operations for
Key and Paul Key and Eastside Kings before I passed my test, because my time with beverages and wine dwindled so much that I really couldn't even pass my exam. I mean, I made that choice where I was like, this is it. Like, I've become this director of operations, and in the restaurant world, that's a really, really great position. Mm-hmm. And I just realized that it was just so far away from my passion that I left, and I went over to McGuire-Mormon to focus solely on the beverage program. So
when you're director of operations, you are doing all the scheduling and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking to the city about, breaking ground on new projects. You're talking to attorneys. You're talking to the accountant. You got to call the plumber if there's something wrong. Like, all of the things. I mean, I said that scheduling is really hard, but I think that maintenance is my least favorite thing.
Right.
Like, talking about grease traps and Ansel systems and HVAC, while I, learned about them, they were definitely not my favorite things to
You get through the day and you're like, I need a glass of wine now.
Exactly. And you're like, oh my God, I didn't even get a chance to taste any wine today. Because I was too busy dealing with all of these fires that I had to put out. And yes, that's still part of my day-to-day, but there's a bigger percentage of my day that is focused on beverage, whether it be computer work or on the phone or, writing out notes or training documents, whether it be like not drinking wine, it's still about booze,
right,
in some fashion,
right?
So it's definitely better.
So speaking of the wine, so many people either enjoy wine a little bit or they'd really like to enjoy wine, but they feel kind of intimidated by it. And sometimes I feel like the folks who really know a ton about wine, they're not necessarily the best person or best people to give an introduction. And one thing that struck me about you, and you have a very approachable relationship to wine. So what should people think about if they're they go into the restaurant and they'd like to order some wine, but they don't really even know where to start?
Well, whenever we were talking earlier, you said that you're unafraid of being embarrassed, and I love that. That is definitely my favorite guest, is willing to throw it out there. Like, I don't even know what I like. I'm like, this is awesome. It's like a blank slate, right? I mean, and we can figure it out together. One of my favorite questions is to ask what you like to drink at home. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily that is what you want to drink that night, right, or that occasion, but at least it gives me a barometer of what style of wine,
right,
you may like. So whether it just kind of understand like the labels or the styles or the grapes within the wines that you are gravitating towards at a grocery store, mm-hmm, and then we can kind of gauge from there what you're into tonight. Like, I usually drink a Cabernet, but maybe tonight I'm feeling like something a little bit lighter,
right,
but not too light. So there's a whole sect of wines that I can shoot out at you right then.
So this makes a lot of sense, and I kind of fit into this plan because I can answer, here's what I drink, and here's maybe I'm feeling like tweaking it a little bit, surprise me. Mm-hmm. But then there's a whole set of people who actually think I know a lot about wine, just to give you some kind of calibration. Mm-hmm. And they kind of say, well, a lot of them are like, well, I know like every once in a while I have this red that I really like, but most red I don't like, so I just drink white because I don't know what to order. They're kind of at that level. Mm-hmm. How do you help them get where they need to go?
Well, I mean, first I think my first question would be like, but are you interested in drinking a red tonight?
Right.
And then if you say yes, then I would probably start with lighter bodied reds, because people who drink white wine generally like that, the feel of the lack of tannins. Like in wines, it's the same thing as that's in tea, right? It's a chemical compound called the tannin. And so if you steep a tea bag too long, it becomes bitter. So if you have too many tannins in wine, it becomes bitter, and it's a textural component. So I'd automatically go to a wine that doesn't have that.
Okay.
So I'd probably throw out a rosé. So that's, mm-hmm, in between a white and a red, right? No, you don't want something pink. Okay, we'll do a light red. Right. Well, this is a little bit too tart. Okay, we'll do a medium-bodied red, but with low tannins, like say a Chateauneuf de Pape or even a Zinfandel that's more fruit-driven, but doesn't have that drying aspect to your palate. So it's really about, honestly, it's about translating what you're saying, mm-hmm, into my knowledge for wine.
Right.
And that I feel only comes with experience. because we learn all of the aspects of wines.
Right.
But that conversational aspect is something that you have to kind of learn.
So I'm hoping that everyone who's listening to this is going to come visit you at June's and have this conversation.
Yeah.
However, a lot of people probably won't get to do that. So they're going to have to go to their grocery store and guess.
Okay.
And so some of the things you're saying about, we'll start with a lighter red. I think that makes sense for a lot of people because some of those tannins, if you're not ready for it, just aren't very enjoyable. What should they be looking for? We're talking like Pinot Noir,
Pinot Noir,
maybe some Merlot.
Light Merlot. So first, I would look. Pinot Noir, Merlot can be light, but it can also be heavy.
Okay.
Southern Rhone.
Okay.
Is not necessarily light, but it's low in tannins. So Grenache is a low tannin red grape variety. Gamay is great, so Beaujolais. And also, if you are looking for something light, look at the alcohol content. So by law, you have to have your alcohol content on a label. So this one says 12% alcohol.
Right.
This is a light red.
Right.
So most white wines are in that 12 to 13% range, and then most red wines are 13 and up.
Right.
So you can look at the alcohol by volume percentage, and that will help you too. That doesn't really say anything about the tannin quality or the fruit quality, but that gives you a weight quality.
Okay. And then there are some folks who say, I know when I started drinking wine, I liked the really heavy reds because I don't know, I just didn't have any. I couldn't taste it or something.
Yeah, you want to know it's there.
Boom.
It's kind of like, okay, so when I was a kid, my favorite drink was the Mexican Cokes. They were I think they're still my favorite. And when you think about it.
Yeah, are you going to get disbarred for being an MS for saying that?
Right, like Mexican Coke and a hamburger. Very, very good pairing. But I really loved them. And they are not shy,
Right.
It's a very aggressive drink. There's a lot of sugar. There's a lot of flavor in there. And it's kind of the same thing with wine. Like, you want to know that you are drinking it. It is there.
Right.
So you need that punch of flavor. So a big red is going to show on your palate rather than a light red. So it kind of just takes some time. And
I don't know what happened if it's, I'd like to think it's me getting more sophisticated, but I think it's probably something other than that.
No, it's totally you getting more sophisticated.
Definitely. Right?
It's you drinking a lot more wine.
I don't know. I feel like about 10 years ago, my wife and I both went from this switch from big cabs and Zinfandels and things like that. And then we kind of went more like Bordeaux and Pinot Noir. And we still drink the spectrum, but we've kind of shifted the middle of the bell curve a little bit. And I don't know what that's about.
I love it. I think it's just experience. I think you just, you now know what this one thing tastes like. You know what Napa Valley Cabernet tastes like, right? And then you want to kind of expand your knowledge and your palate, and you're introducing yourself to something new, and then your taste just switch too.
Yeah.
And you can start, honestly, you start finding nuance, right?
Right.
So you're looking for nuance, and a very glimmering generality is that European wines tend to have a little bit more nuance because their fruit is more dim, so you can taste more things.
Right. That's very fair. And maybe it's also that I eat more subtle stuff too.
Absolutely. Yes. 100%. Like, I think subtle foods need subtle wines unless you don't care about the pairing, which is also completely fine.
See, folks, this is why June is so awesome.
No judgment.
Because there's no judgment. There's no rules. You can have a Mexican Coke, a hamburger, and a glass of Austrian red, and it's all good as long as you're enjoying it.
Yes. I mean, like, when I go to brunch, I can never choose at brunch. I'm the worst. So I have like a water, a juice, a champagne, a Bloody Mary, and a coffee in front of me because I need everything. Usually it's because I'm hungover, but...
Oh, that's great. Somehow, do we have any pictures on Twitter or anything of that brunch?
I'm sure, and it's just me just like looking real sad.
Well, it sounds kind of happy to me. We'll see if we could get some pictures of that. There's a picture. My wife and I went and we did a tasting at Rudd in California, and that was actually some really yummy Pinot Cabernet along with some other things. And they had so many glasses out, and it was so good. And I didn't want to leave anything there to insult the people there. and I can't remember the name of the gentleman. There was actually an MS in the room there who was on staff for them.
Oh, it was Drew Hendricks.
Okay, there you go.
He is my mentor.
All right, how about
That's crazy.
It's
He's from Texas, and he's amazing. He's hilarious and so real as well.
Okay, awesome. I remember him saying a few things. He wasn't the one giving the tour, so he would just sort of like chime in here and there. So I didn't get to know him real well, but he was fun, and so it was so good. So I had all my wine. And then my wife would like taste a little bit of each of hers. So I'm like, well, we can't abuse that by leaving it there. So I ended up with
all of the wine.
All of the glasses. And there's a picture of me that just looks, I don't know what.
That's awesome.
But anyhow, so going back to enjoying wine, I guess find kind of where you want to be on the spectrum from light to heavy.
Yes.
And do most restaurants kind of organize light to heavy on their menu?
It depends. And again, that is a really great question to ask too. Like, is there a specific way that you organize the menu? A lot of people and a lot of our locations actually organize the menu by price. Just because there are totally different philosophies of wine lists. So for instance, at Perla's, it's by price. But when you think about Perla's, it is in the middle of a strip on South Congress that's very, very fast paced. It's very tourist heavy as well. And there's about 600 people that go back and forth into Perla's within the span of a day.
Okay.
It's insane. So the service has to be very fast. And a lot of times so that's why the list is A, smaller, B, listed by price, because you have a lot of tourists that are kind of just like, they've got a price that they're looking for, and then there's not a sommelier on the floor.
Right.
So, I think by price, light to heavy. At Josephine House, it's light to heavy. Because it's a neighborhood, people tend to have a little bit more time and can have that conversation with our guests. And then at Jeffrey's, it's such a huge list. We have sommeliers on staff to talk to you about how the list is generated, and it's by region.
Right. So that's kind of like the top of the way the menus are organized is when you have the regional.
Yeah, I think regional for the large like the tomes, right? The big books of menus, like that's kind of the way to go.
Right. It was funny because when we tried to go to June's and it was closed and we ended up at Jeffrey's, I used to live in the apartment building across the street. With all the UT students and whatnot. And that's where I was living when my wife and I met. So whenever we end up over there, we just look over and think, my goodness, we're only 100 feet away, but we've come so far in space and time. It's unbelievable.
That's so crazy. I went to Jeffrey's like on my first date with my boyfriend at the time when I was in college. And I remember we thought we were amazing. Like, oh my God, we're going to Jeffrey's and we're going to drink Cabernet and drink Cock Manhattan and like have a oyster on a yucca chip, like all of that stuff. It was the place to go, and it was just like that upper echelon. And I think that McGuire-Mormon has done a really great job with kind of staying true to the restaurant, but also elevating it too.
Yeah. And a lot of the cocktails are a whole different world that I don't.
It's great.
I'm too lazy. I'm like, if I could just take the cork out and drink that.
Right.
Like, why would I do all this mixing of stuff? So you also just opened your own restaurant.
Yes.
What prompted you to take that on? Doesn't that involve a whole bunch of the stuff you hate doing?
Yes. Well, what prompted me to do that is Larry McGuire.
Okay.
And so whenever he actually heard through the grapevine that I was possibly looking for another job from Key because I wanted to get back into beverages.
Okay.
So he actually reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I like who you are. I like what you're about. I like your style. I like, the fact that you're not a snob, but you get your work done and, you're a legitimate restaurant person. Let's start talking." So we talked for a really long while, actually, because I was so scared to change jobs because I felt like I had given up so much of my life and time and energy and effort to opening Key.
Right.
So whenever we were talking, he honestly, probably the second conversation in, he said, "And then we'll open something together." And which is always kind of like that weird star that's far away. Like,
right.
really? Is it just twinkling there? Or is it like an airplane? Right? Like, is it for real? And I was like, yeah, I do want to open something of my own and have autonomy, but I don't want to lose the opportunity to do multiple beverage programs because I love that. I love different concepts, and I love being able to really work with the entire world of wine. Like, if I only had one restaurant, it really minimizes the amount of wine that you can work with.
This is what we call, I don't know what's beyond first world problems. But...
Right. Yeah, there's so much good wine out there. I want to buy all of it for everybody. It's totally like first world problems. So really in the genesis of this position, we discussed the possibility of opening a restaurant, a space. I wanted to open a bar, honestly. I didn't want to open a restaurant.
Right.
I was like, I would love to open a wine bar. I feel like there's definitely room for more wine bars in Austin. At the time, there was only Vino and Wink, but you could still get food at Wink. And I was like, just wine, no food. And he was like, that's weird. We only do restaurants. And I was like, no, food is great. But we have that. Let's do a different concept. So just back and forth. And then about, honestly, like a year and a half in, we got this call that the space that we're in now, which was formerly Wayu's, that they were looking to get out of their lease. And the landlord called us. And I got this text from Larry, and he said, this space just fell in our lap. We need to look at it and pursue it. I know that, I did not forget about our conversation, and we need to open something together. Let's do it.
So this is, you're already working for him, doing the beverage direction for all these different properties.
Yes.
And now, because just the way the world works, somebody needs to get out of their lease, and boom, you're about to open a restaurant. This is not a master plan, is what you're saying.
No, we had not been aggressively pursuing a space.
Okay.
That being said, I think that he and Tom of McGuire Merman they are always they're just old Austin, so they'll find out a space is about to come up, or they'll just be driving and then they'll see a location that, that's been coveted for a bit, like what's going on over there. So, and they're unafraid to ask too, like what's going on with this spot. That could be cool. Let's walk it, so they're always open-eyed about what's going on in Austin and how that can expand or make better the company. And in this case, I would always kind of drive around, and I kind of was thinking about the east side because McGuire Merman is a very west side company. We don't have any properties on the east side. Just kind of thinking like, what is the next step? What would I like to do? And then present it to them, right? It was going to be me presenting something to them. And in this case, it was like someone third party presenting something to us.
Right.
And I mean, it's just such a wonderful location. And so oddly enough, that location used to be Texas French bread. And that kitchen was the first kitchen that Larry ever worked in. Huh. So there's this old Austin history that's tied together. I used to live about half a mile down the street and would just frequent South Congress for years and would go to Perla's once a week and sit on the patio and spend way too much money on oysters. So there's definitely like a relationship with the South Congress strip for me and growing up and just being part of the industry. So it was really hard to say no to.
And then how did you decide, okay, now you've got this place that's apparently not going to be just wine. What's it going to be?
So, the city decided that it can't just be wine. It is zoned as a restaurant. So
if it could have been, if the city hadn't gotten in the way, it would have been just wine?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, it was just kind of, we asked, and that was pretty much a strict no. And so we just started talking like, well, let's have food. And I was like, okay, well, there's already a kitchen there.
Right.
And then there's just a lot of back and forth of what it was going to be. And at the time, I had been traveling a lot to New York. And there was this kind of, I don't know, this energy in the air in New York where these places were really, really jamming, and they were like wine bars but restaurants, or restaurants but wine bars. Like there was kind of a, where am I going? Oh, I don't feel bad if I just order a bottle of wine and have a couple snacks, or I can have a full meal here. Okay. So I really
like that. That sounds good.
That feel. And I was like, okay, I think we can do this. And Larry had been traveling a lot to Europe. So we, part of our group is also By George, which is the clothing store, retail store. So we go to market, like our team goes to market in Paris to buy clothing and all of that stuff. So there's this one hotel that he stays in that has like the same breakfast. And so he loved that bistro feel. Mm-hmm. But then I also wanted like a wine feel. And that's kind of where that design happened.
Okay.
Like it's the idea that we wanted something for the neighborhood, but also like a playground for me to play with wines that you might not normally pour at one of our locations. So if you say it's a wine focused place, people are willing to be more adventurous about wine. Just like if you say it's a sushi restaurant, right? You would probably be more adventurous by trying different types of uni.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So if conceptually you're throwing it out into the universe and saying, this is a wine bar and you can also have a really great meal here, people are okay with trying a Saint Laurent. But if you went to Lambert's Barbecue and you saw that, you'll probably order a beer. It's about, I don't know.
Like, this is...
It's really good, yeah. But it's like, it's like...
But you're right. If I had walked in, I wouldn't know to order this.
Yeah, you'd be like, I don't know what that is, but I really do want brisket and, a double box sounds really good with a brisket or whatever.
By the way, this is just beautiful. It's really opening up nicely.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's kind of, I don't know the right words, but it tastes kind of like drinking velvet or something.
Yes, it's also got a little bit of a perfumey note to it. It's got some floral qualities. I like it.
It does, but it's nice that it's soft.
Yes.
Sometimes the flowery stuff, it's like so overwhelming to me that I don't like it, but it has a little hint of it. It
can be pretty heady, and like florals, especially something like lavender, is super polarizing.
Yes.
People either love it or hate it. And so you're already like losing like 50% of, your possible consumer by that one wine.
So when you open this place, you've kind of been in the business. It's not just like you've been a wine expert. You've been helping restaurants run for a long time, but now you've got your own place. Were there any surprises left for you in terms of the business aspect, the sales and marketing aspect?
I would say yes. It was a very smooth opening, and I think it's because this is the first time that I have had the opportunity to be there from the genesis. Okay. So I've opened the restaurants that I've opened in town. I've opened Uchiko, I've opened Key, Congress, Second Bar and Kitchen, like a few Eastside Kings. So there's been a lot of restaurant openings in my life, but oftentimes like that the beverage program is very second fiddle to everything else. So I kind of get brought in later, and then kind of deal with the operations aspect after the fact. And in this case, it's been really awesome because we've been able to kind of flush out all of those details as far as service too. Like, no, I would like the wine glasses to be here, so we need a little cubby for this, rather than trying to make sense of the space and where things go after it's already been built.
Okay.
You can design it around what the concept is. And not that the other locations haven't done that, but those decisions were made prior to me really being part of that opening team.
Okay. And then how much time do you spend talking to folks who come in, the actual patrons?
A lot. And it's really, one of my biggest woes is that I always get a text at least once a day. Like, I am here. I am at your place. Where are you? And I will have just left, or I am not yet there. And that's kind of, that's one of the sacrifices of being open breakfast, lunch, and dinner is there's no way that I can be there the entire time.
So when we make it in and I don't see you, don't text you, June, where are you?
No, do ask. Because, okay, so this is my favorite part, because I was super, super scared to open a place that had my name on the door. I did not want to do that. I was ready to call it something else, but in the process of talking about a space, Larry and Tom just kept calling it. And then we'll open June's place, or June will have a place, and that'll be her space, and we'll do a space with June's. So they just kept saying my name over and over again, and they just fell in love with it. And I was like, no one loves their name. Like, no one grows up thinking that their name is like the coolest name on the planet.
Are we saying this ironically right now because we're in the we're almost at the end, thank goodness, of a presidential election where somebody obviously really loves his name?
Yeah, exactly. No rational human being.
So we're not going to start building towers called June's Place.
No way. And I mean, I would say like, well, then let's just call it Larry's, or let's call it Tom's. And they're like, no, those names are stupid. And I was like, see what I mean? You are completely, you're validating my point. And they're like, no, your name makes sense. And I mean, looking back on it, it does, right? Like, all of our locations are very clever names. And Jeff's, like we call Jeffrey's Jeff's. Lambert's obviously is Lou. And then there's Clark's, which is an homage to the Clarksville neighborhood, but it sounds like a name. And then just like June's, it just fits right in there. And I'm like, oh my God, okay. And they're like, and honestly, it's a month in the year. And I was like, not when it's possessive, guys. Not when it's possessive. But they convinced me, and as long as I think about it as an entity rather than myself, I think that it works. But it is very weird to see your name on a door. One of the design aspects that I was like, I put my foot down, because quite frankly, the design aspects are really beautiful in there, and I had no issues with most of it. I was like, this is great, beautiful. I just needed the sign to be smaller. Like,
you didn't want June's?
No. I was so scared. Because Perla's is huge, like the Clark sign is neon, and I was like, can we maybe do something smaller? And then we came up with a very small, ceramic name on the side of the door, and I was like, yes, subtle. Okay, I can live with this. Like, I don't have to pass by a building with my name in neon.
Right.
I think we're in a good spot. So I'm acclimated to it. But back to your thing. If you're there, you should text me and ask if I'm there, because we moved our company's offices behind the restaurant.
Okay.
Which, honestly, that decision really made me more comfortable, because then all of my downtime could be right behind the restaurant. So I can just swoop right in if there is someone that's there to be like, oh, okay, 1 second. And then walk right in and be able to say hi to a patron. If it's super busy, walk right in and start helping with service, like put down my downtime, turn my computer off for a second, and go. And
do you have other sommeliers on staff?
At June's, I have a beverage manager. Her name is Rania. She was at the Four Seasons here in Austin and opened La Vie. And so she's very seasoned. She's an advanced, so she's one step below a master, and she will sit for the first time for the first part of the master exam next year.
Wow. Okay. So you haven't dissuaded her. She's still going for it.
Still going for it.
I'm really
Absolutely.
like June.
Yeah. No, and that's what you. I want to say that's what you do, but that's what you should do after you get your master certification. It's really about mentorship. There is this, there's mystery behind it because there's so few of us, but we want there to be more,
Okay.
And I definitely want there to be more women, for sure. There's only 23 of us, I believe, right now in North America for women. That's crazy. Right. And I think that there's 32 in the world. That's a very low number. I will say that there's a huge amount of women on the docket to take the test soon. So hopefully that'll change. Okay.
So when you're actually on the floor, you're talking to customers and helping them select wines.
Yeah.
How does that go? I mean, I know that you've been doing this for a long time. You're an expert. Do you think about it differently when it's your place and you're managing the P&L versus you have a beverage list and you're maybe not thinking about some of the other aspects behind it?
No, I think so I always think about the P&L.
Okay.
Always. But at the same time, nothing gets on the list without really fleshing out what that would look like. So everything that's on the list is always fair game. Like I like everything on the list. I think everything tastes good on every list. And then also everything has been priced for a specific reason. So it doesn't matter, So I've done all of my P&L homework prior to, so that's kind of done.
So people can select whatever makes them happy and you're automatically happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really the end game, is finding that one or two, whatever, how many bottles it is, that is really like hitting that note with that particular guest. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that makes me the most happy. So really walking into my own restaurant and being able to do that is a pinnacle in someone's career, because you're doing it for yourself.
Right. Let's have another sip of wine.
Yeah, do it. But I would say that the process of me finding that wine or making suggestions is exactly the same in every location.
Okay. And how much of your time has to go to sort of managing the restaurant overall versus managing the beverage list?
A lot.
Right. So you kind of went from, I want to make sure I have a lot of time to manage beverages and drink wine, to now have my own restaurant that I have to run and have to make sure we have schedules for people and that they show up when they say they're, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's like you went to do something, and it almost seems like you didn't end up back where you started, but you kind of the wave cycle back a little bit. Oh, it's totally a cycle.
Yes, it's totally a wave cycle. So right now where we are, we have been open almost 3 months. So we're still babies. So yes, there is a huge amount of time that is dedicated simply to making sure that the operations are on point. And it's back to that formula of, we got to get this operationally on point, become more efficient, so we then find more time to do the things that we love. So I still have to manage the beverage programs of the 6 other restaurants. Any outside events. Essentially, I'm still trying to find the time to do all of the other restaurants and all of the events outside of the restaurants, Formula One, private events, holiday events, speaking events.
Podcast interviews.
Yes. So I do all of those. But right now, those have taken, that time has been minimized. And all of the beverage managers at each location knows that. And I'm like, this is your time to put on your big boy and big girl pants and tell me that you can do it. Because at the end of the month, when I'm looking at your P&L, it better be right, So this is actually a really great way for them to have a little bit of a playground right now, because they can start making more autonomous decisions and say, like, I really love this line, and June's kind of like less, micromanagey, and I am known for being micromanagey, by the way.
Right.
Like, she's a little more, more free with allowing me to make decisions. So this is their opportunity to set sail and be a little more autonomous with their list. Granted, am I going to come back and look at all those decisions? Yes, but I will probably be actually happy. So it's a really great opportunity for both of us, for me to step a little bit away from micromanaging them, and for them to feel a little bit more of a creative power with their lists.
I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, especially when they're an expert, they start a company. Most people I talk to are starting some kind of tech or consulting company, maybe a law practice or something. They're not starting something as creative as a restaurant, but they're so good at what they do, they have a terribly hard time delegating, because no one's going to do it as well. And I think in some ways it's nice because you have this situation where you're forced to delegate, but you also have a way to sort of objectively measure whether people are doing a good job.
Yes.
So that makes it good for everybody.
Absolutely. In the end, the bottom line is definitely the most important thing for the company. So if they can do that, which honestly, a lot of people don't know how to do it. There's very few people that actually go to restaurant school, to hospitality school.
Right.
There's Cornell, which is fabulous. There's CIA and everything like that, where you can get a hospitality degree, but very few people do it. A lot of people fall into it, like I did in college. So I felt like I had to learn, because there wasn't a degree. I'm very like degree oriented, clearly, that like you gotta be to pass that exam, but a lot of people just don't. And so it's been one of my bigger projects to make sure that my team knows how to do it, because a lot of time even a general manager doesn't realize that you have to take someone step by step through a P&L and understand the cause and effect of everything that they do. The purchasing, the consumption, comping, spills, all of that. Right. Efficiency. A lot of times, like, you know, those things are second to making sure that the restaurant is going.
Right. And it's funny because when I we lined up this interview, I was thinking you're going to have a lot of interesting things to say about customer experience, which I do want to ask you about in a second. Yeah. But all of this basic blocking and tackling stuff is basically spreadsheet stuff that applies to any service business.
Absolutely.
And there's so many service businesses out there. The kind of ones I deal with are more technical services. They're not wine services, unfortunately, where people don't have any idea. They're totally mathematically minded. They may spend all day on spreadsheets for their customers, but they have no idea what the real drivers of their own P&L are, where their money is coming. They might know where it's coming from, but they don't really know where it's going, and so on.
Yeah, it's a really interesting matrix, because I think the restaurant world is you know, it's weird because you have to understand, you have to have really great social intuit, right? Because you have to be able to read people. That's what makes you engaged with your guests, and that's about the experience. You know, to me, the most important thing is acknowledgement, and if you see a guest twice, you should acknowledge that you've seen them before. Okay. And say hello to them, because that's what people want. They want the acknowledgement that they are there and you are there to provide them a good time.
How do you remember that? I'd be doomed in the restaurant business.
Sometimes I make notes, honestly, especially if I know that they've been in there, but I keep forgetting their names. I'll actually just make a note. We have like management logs. I'll make a note like, the guy that likes the bolognese with the dolcettos name is Luis or whatever.
But you have to know what he looks like.
Yeah, you do. But I associate people with wine. Like, okay. Like, so once I find out what your tastes are, I'm like, okay. And sometimes that's how I remember people is, I'm so sorry. What is your name? I forgot it, but I do recall the last 3 bottles of wine that you've ordered the last 3 times that you've come into this restaurant. And that's acknowledgement in and of itself, right? Oh my God, thank you for remembering that I like these styles of wines, and now recommend me something else, you know? And that gives comfort to people. I mean, I feel comfort when someone says like, your face looks familiar, but I feel like we've met before, right. And then we can work out where that is. A lot of times people just kind of like, I'm not going to say anything because I can't remember the whole experience. And I think that's very important. So acknowledgement and providing a really great experience. And that can be with wine, but there are people that walk into the restaurants that don't want to drink or don't drink. One of my friends, she owns one of the businesses down the street from us that I love. And she comes in with her family and they don't drink. They're teetotalers. But they come in once a week and bring their dog on the patio. And it's awesome. And, you know, after the second time, my like inclination is always to say, here's the wine list. Let me know what you're interested in. After the second time, I already know that they're going to drink Topo Chico. Right. So that's already in the making, and you just omit that part of the conversation to make them feel less uncomfortable to have to say like, we don't drink or what have you. And so that's enhancing their experience. That makes them feel comfortable in their environment, you know?
So it's all about personalizing.
So you have to, that social intuit, right? You have to be able to read people. You have to translate the technicality of wine and food, right? And all of that language into language that you're going to personalize based on the person in front of you. Right. You know, so I always say don't be casual until your guest is casual. Like their bartenders are just like, hey man, what's up? And I'm like, no, hey man, what's up? Until your guest is, hey man, what's up? And they're like, what do you mean? And I was just like, what if it was like a British professor that's super uptight? Like, you don't, hey man, what's up, that guy. You say, hello, welcome, so why don't we take the most erudite snob idea in our head, start from there, and then become more casual as you have the experience with the people in front of you. So I'm totally fine with high fives and all of that stuff and people hugging guests as long as the guest does it first.
Right. Okay.
So there's that personalized experience as well. Like, I want to be the restaurant where we know all of our neighbors and what their drink is without seeming stalkery.
So the guest gets to make it as casual as they want it to be.
Absolutely.
But you start off being professional.
Yes.
Which I think is something that is a little bit trickier in today's world, whether you're in restaurant business or any other business, because the rules aren't as clear as they used to be.
Absolutely.
You can come in a suit. You could come in flip-flops, especially in Austin. Who knows?
Yeah.
And the guy in flip-flops could be a billionaire, and the guy in a suit could not be, and you never know what you're going to encounter.
Yes, I 100% agree. So you start as professional as possible, and then you cater that experience to the guest, because some guests don't want to be bothered. And that's honestly kind of the most difficult guest, is the guest that you need to speak as little as possible to, because they don't want to be bothered, but you still need to relay information to them.
Right.
Because there's always like, is everything okay? Is everything okay? Is everything okay? May I get you anything else? And that might be a guest that is just simply doesn't want to talk to you. They want to enjoy their glass of wine, have some alone time, not speak to anyone. That is the most difficult guest to read right there, because you need to relay information to each other, but they don't want to use words.
Right.
Oftentimes it's the other thing where you're like, how do I back away from this table because I have 5 other tables to deal with? So there's that aspect that's very important in restaurants, and some people are brilliant at them, but they can't read a spreadsheet. So how do you balance that out? You've got to have a balance in a really great team, and that's what allows me to be able to still do everything else that I do. Is you have to have a strong management team, and you have to be willing to delegate, which is, again, hard when you're a control freak.
So control freak, but you have to be able to delegate, or you have to just set yourself up where you can't possibly not delegate. Then you have to start delegating. But you set it up in such a way that you can measure and correct and coach.
Exactly.
Which I think is important. A lot of times people don't have the measurement in place. And so it's or they say, here's something that has to get done. And then at the end of the week, did I like it or not? And they're either super happy or super angry. But it's kind of like they're taking one data point and they're just going nuts with that data point, instead of, hey, here's some rope. Call me if you need help, and I'll come check on you at the end of the month in your case.
And sometimes I realize that I am very tough on my team. Sometimes my biggest criticism is that they did not raise the flag because they wanted to prove to me that they could do it all.
Right.
And
how do you handle that?
That is actually when I get the most mad, quite frankly, because if you can't, you can't ever be successful if you feel like you can do everything. It's not possible. And that's honestly the lesson that I have taught myself, and why I delegate things to people, because there's no way I could do my job if I didn't do that. Right.
But it seems like that's the thing that all of us control freaks, and I'm a fellow control freak, so I understand. It's the thing that we all get panicked about. It's like we can even accept that something might be 80% of what we think we would do, whether or not it is. It's probably 120, but we think it's 80. But we're nervous that it might have completely blown up and no one told us. At least for me, that's always my problem. And I would always say, just tell me if you need help. But I would never say it right. So I know that all the people that I would hire or that I would outsource to, they all wanted to prove they could do it. So no matter what I said, it was almost like I knew that I was saying it the wrong way.
And I honestly, this is still like a lesson that I'm learning, because I feel like my actions are saying, I want you to prove to me that you can do it all. But I'm saying you failed because you did not tell me that you needed help. Right. So of course you want someone who can do it all, because then that gives you more time to add something onto your plate. Right. Right. And that's very difficult. But at the same time, I think that, the things that I am most critical in people are the things that are most critical towards myself.
Sure.
Right? So I'm most critical to them for not delegating because it's difficult for me to delegate. You know? Like
right.
I see those necessities in my day-to-day job. So in order for me to be able to do that, I need to know that they can do that too.
Right. So if I can recap your rules for service, because I think there's something to be learned well outside the restaurant industry here. We've got having some kind of good social intuition. I think is very hard, right? This is the Sales for Nerds podcast, after all. A lot of people.
So difficult. It is so difficult. The social intuition is, it's the hardest. It's the hardest. You can't teach it.
You can practice it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's that acknowledgement too. So I do definitely have people on my staff that social intuition, not so good. So I have to acknowledge when they did not read something correctly and to pick it apart. For instance, see how they looked around and you saw that and you walked away and you prioritized something else rather than directly walk to that table to ask them if they needed anything. Like that was the wrong read. If someone is looking around but not looking at something specifically, they are looking for you. Or they are looking for something that they have not found. If their eyes are moving around the restaurant, Right. So you need to help them find that. But you acknowledge that in your brain because I saw you look at them and then you chose to do something else and then go back to that table. That was the wrong, prioritization. So that's been something that I've had to work on as a manager because it's so hard to translate that to people, because that's just, it's a social intuition.
And it's hard also, I think, in a lot of services businesses, and most of us are in services businesses in some way, shape, or form these days. It's like, because any customer can sort of flag you down at any time, and multiple customers can flag you down at the same time, even if you're assuming you can read the situation perfectly, which is a stretch for me, but like you may not be able to respond as quickly as you would like, or you may spend all your time responding and not actually bake the thing in the back that you really need to bake.
Yes, exactly. And so the acknowledgement issue is also something when you acknowledge that you did something wrong. And I think that very few people do that. And this is just, very few servers do that. Like, I think that it is okay to say, I apologize that your steak took longer than I anticipated, rather than just hope that someone didn't notice.
So, and I kind of have a philosophy for this because I'm trying to do this in my business, in my life, is just treat everybody as a person. And I think sometimes when we're at work, we treat people as a customer, which is different than a person, right? Because if it was just a person, you'd be like, hey, I'm sorry, I kept you waiting for your steak. And then the other person would say, that's okay, it smells delicious, and you'd move on. But when you show up and you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to admit to this customer their steak took too long, now they're annoyed that their steak took a long time and no one made them feel better and their steak doesn't taste as good. Exactly.
You're absolutely. And I think, people, so I did a training session at By George. They're retailers, right? So I asked them if they could start calling their customers guests, and it totally changed their outlook. They were really like, what do you mean? And I was just like, because they're your guests. You want people to feel good. And if you call them your customer, your expectation is a nominal exchange. Right. So, but if they're your guest, then they're already comfortable and things become easier. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I also introduced booze to By George, which is very, very important.
I can't believe they didn't think of that on their own.
I think they had they totally had a couple things aligned, but there is a bar,
that's brilliant.
If you go to the men's section at the By George on South Lamar, there is an entire selection of mezcals and scotches and bourbons there for you to sip on while you're trying on clothes.
That's exactly what they need to ply me with to get me to buy their expensive clothes.
Exactly. It works every time. I mean, it works on me, and I know what that's for.
Right.
I'm like, I will have a glass of wine, guys.
I don't think I've ever been in this store, but it's a funny story. They have that garage sale every year in Austin. And I remember I went and I got some nice pants at By George. And I don't know, they were like list price $200 or something. They were like $15 at By George.
You have to get them.
But there were some other pants there that were listed for $10. And I was like, how come these are 15 and these other ones are 10? And the poor lady who owns By George, she just gave me this look like she wanted to cry.
Like, guy, just
come on,
get both of them.
Yeah.
Right? I know exactly. Well, I mean, I'm kind of the opposite. I am horrible there. Like, I actually, I'm an assistant beverage director, and she's awesome, Daisy. She generally does all the By George stuff because I get in so much trouble if I am there, because I'll end up buying something like, oh, let me just I'm going to do this event, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to walk out with this thing, and I'll end up buying things while I'm there, which is counterintuitive to work.
Well, if it's what you enjoy and what you care about, I think the funny thing for me is I spend so much time with my customers helping them raise prices and do value-based pricing and so on. Mm-hmm. And then there's things like pants that I'm like, okay, I guess I'll buy these for $15, I guess.
I know, but it's just like you just want to make sure that you're really getting as good as a deal as the other pair of pants.
And I have to say that they're really nice wool pants, and I still have them 10 years later. And
fabulous.
Whatever.
They were a great investment.
They're worth the $15.
They were worth $15. That designer pair of pants
from Italy or something. I don't know.
That's amazing. That's amazing. But yeah, I mean, thinking of people as guests are really important. And I've noticed that with retailers is there's the idea that they're customers, and yes, are they customers? Yes, there's going to be a customer transaction, hopefully, at the end of the day, but if you treat them as guests, there will probably be an easier customer transaction.
Well, it's you don't want your doctor to treat you as a customer, right? They're supposed to treat you like a patient, hopefully.
Exactly.
But they're going to make money by doing stuff for your health, hopefully. Yes,
but in the end, they're happy and you're happy.
Right.
And if there's a better relationship initially, it's much easier to go through that.
And that's what Disney does too, right? All the employees are cast members and all the visitors are guests.
It's amazing.
I'm not a Disney fan, but they do that right.
They do it. I just went to the Orlando Four Seasons. That's within Disney, and it is insanely good. I just there because you have the Four Seasons level of standards plus the Disney level of standards, and I was like, this is way too. Oh, it's weird. I mean, it was almost too much, but it was impeccable. It was insane. It's great. So,
very good. We could talk about this for a long time. We still have a little bit of wine left, and I actually do have some wine that you might even consider drinkable. But I know you have not only a restaurant to run, you have a half dozen wine lists to curate and many other things to do. But I really, really appreciate your time. If you haven't checked it out yet, check out junesallday.com. And you have a Twitter handle, right?
Yeah, it's June Rodil.
June Rodil. I'll put that in the show notes so people can find that easily.
Awesome. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for having me.